Okay, good morning everyone, welcome. Nice to see you all. Workshop, is that correct, Madam CEO?
Yes, good morning. We are recording this one, and apologies, I'm not quite sure where that screen is working. We'll work on that in a second. So just we've got a lot of interest from staff, obviously, and we're recording because of the public interest.
Cool. Okay, Tony. Good morning.
Morning, Your Worship. Morning again, Councillors. I'm not going to start with any jokes, so we're going to go straight into it. Although I was going to rename the presentation "Come on in, the water's lovely," but I won't do that. So I'll crack on. I will continue. And look, really, there's a couple of takeaways we'd like for you to just be aware of what we do this workshop, and we'll come back to those as we at the end. And it's really just we've got a paper coming to you on the 10th of December around the heads of agreement with the Waikato Water Done Well, and we really want you to ensure that you've got sufficient background knowledge when we come to that paper in December, and then we also want to ensure that you've got sufficient background knowledge on the options analysis that we're doing that's happening in the background as part of our water services delivery plan. And then also, thirdly, it's around ensuring the timeline that we've got in front of us. Now, some of this will be part of our recap. This is the first time we've sat in front of you talking about local waters done well. In fact, we covered a little bit just now in our Councillors catch up. So we've got quite a bit of material. We're going to chunk it down. Happy to take questions as we go through. But just be aware that when we start talking about the heads of agreement, we're not going to be going down into any great detail because fundamentally there's no changes to the heads of agreement. That's done. It's just really making you aware of what the high level components of that heads of agreement are, and we will go through that. And then we'll cover off what some of those options we're looking at for water services delivery looking ahead when we go through the options analysis on that. And again, very high level. It's really just, like I said, the preparation for that for the heads of agreement. I'll call it HOA, just easier, for the 10th of December. And Joe's going to be doing all the talking, which is great, and I will just chip in and make myself look, and just provide advice as we can go through that. All right, so we've got the slides, so we'll crack on.
And just appreciate we are not long in this building. Very much looking forward to a new building with some IT that works perfectly, but we do have a slight screen issue on one side. If we had to stop, we would have to shut down the system. So if we can just use the information that's in diligent, we will carry on.
And just on that note, as I mentioned earlier, we did send all the information that you've got in diligent, but we've just streamlined the presentation just to make it a bit more easier to fit into the time that we've got allocated this morning. And just through the for your worship, this one was scheduled for an hour from 9:30 to 10:30. I'm assuming that we just continue on to 10:30. Possibly even 11:30, whatever time. Where are we? Okay.
Okay, right, we'll crack into it, Jay. Good to see you.
Great. So I think, the most important thing that we really just need to make sure that we're all on the same page is where we're at in our timeline. So and just be aware that, we're not just doing this for fun. This is part of the legislation required under Local Water Done Well, that we have to submit our water services delivery plan by next September. In order to really meet that deadline, we need to make a decision by June. That means we're planning to consult on what our options are, which is a requirement of the legislation in March. To do that, we need to decide on what our consultation options are in February. And so where are we at the moment? So there's obviously been a lot of high level work happening to understand, what our options are, and even just to understand all the legislation. I'd say we're in a pretty good state with that at the moment. That work has progressed. And, we do know what we need to do at the moment. We're in the state of gathering our options and sort of getting into the details of what they look like and how are we going to weigh them up against each other and what do they look like. So the piece, just to kind of point out, we're in the present moment is we have worked on our options, but we're getting into more detail And we're going to have that, what we've put together externally reviewed, just so that we have that kind of outside perspective on and how we're weighing up these different priorities and different, you know, all of the options have advantages and disadvantages. So it's just how we're going to kind of frame that. I think that's it. Anything else?
And I guess another important point here is that this is information today, but we will be coming back to you in the new year with what the options assessment is telling us, and then what information we're going to be putting out into our communities for consultation in the new year.
Yeah. And just to kind of, obviously it's not on the slide, but a key part of that is the Waikato water as one of the options. So the decision coming shortly about deciding to continue on that path is really about enabling it to be one of the options that we're considering, so that we're doing a full and thorough kind of analysis.
Yeah, and certainly, obviously, the DIA will be carrying out quite a bit of scrutiny on making sure that we have looked at all the options right across the board, and we'll cover off what those options are. But now we're just going to move into what the heads of agreement actually covers. And again, just to reiterate that the heads of agreement as part of the Waikato Waters Done Well is an option.
Obviously, public consultation, we go with 2 options. We could go with 3 if we deem it prudent, but obviously we'll work through that. You know, that may not be necessary or prudent. It's potentially possible.
Yep, Director Chair, that's absolutely correct. And of course, it's making sure that we've got information available to us, that we have discounted ones and why we've discounted them. And certainly through the Chair, just something I did forget to explain was that we've got a steering group, and there's 3 elected members. We've got 4 elected members on the steering group, and there's 3 around the table at the moment. That's Councillor Parks, Councillor Taylor, and Councillor Williamson. Councillor Fletcher is also on that one, but I understand he's unavailable this morning. So just to give some assurance and confidence to the rest of the elected members that we've got a steering group, and with also actually a working group as well with internal enterprise leadership team members who are putting all of the data together.
So is there any questions on the timeline and what we're actually doing? It's tight, yes. It's true, it's extremely tight, and that has been, the steering group is getting sick of seeing me, because we've been talking about this a lot over the last few weeks, because there isn't much time wiggle room. So obviously, as we said, you know, we'll be coming to decide on what those preferred options are in February, and it's the 26th of November. So,
Councillor Lachlan. Yes, is there like a sort of landing point where we need to like provide feedback to the submissions and everything else, and have we got enough lead time for that? I'm just mindful that sometimes these things get a bit crunch. You get like more submissions than you expect, and there's a bit more extra work. So just I'm explaining myself, please.
no, it's a very good question, and we've just been working through the detailed timeline in the last couple of weeks just to flesh that out. So at the moment, we're thinking if we consult in March, submissions and feedback will be in April, so allowing enough time to obviously process all that, not really knowing how much or we'll, what the feedback will look like. So yeah, so we have built that into the plan, and that's why we're you know, planning to come back with the final decision being June, so that'll give April and May to kind of do the working through that final feedback and analysis.
Just managing expectations, it's going to feel really tight with this time frame. I think we acknowledge that this is tight. When all councils were submitting to the bill around the time frame for the preparation of the water services delivery plan, most of the sector asked for 2 years. That was declined, and we've stuck with the September deadline. So I feel for those councils that are trying to develop an LTP at the same time as doing this work. It's a lot of pressure on us as an organisation to meet these timeframes, and it is going to feel quite tight.
Through just Councillor Parks. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor. What do you go? There you go.
Councillor Williamson.
Oh, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too far here, but obviously with timelines, obviously if we sign the heads of agreement, that's the first on-ramp in terms of the timeline. But there are 2 opportunities, 2 off-ramp opportunities down the track. So
Yeah, through the chair, we have got a slide that indicates those on ramps and off ramps and the timeframes around this.
Yeah, thank you. Just through the chair, I was just going to mention, Tony, that and Joe, that unlike the three waters, we're going to be able to actually go out and have an opportunity to consult. So hopefully, with that feeling of the three waters being done too, not taken on the journey, will hopefully get people more urgently engaged than our normal consultation processes. It is really tight.
Councillor Campbell.
Well, yeah, I'm not getting ahead of it, but just a question before you launch into it. Rotorua, well, my perception is Bay of Plenty are not pushing so hard for this joint CCO thing of all their councils, and my understanding is Rotorua has already some time ago decided to go alone, better or worse. Are you communicating with them about, because there's obviously there's challenges, same challenges we would face, working with them, talking with them, since they're near our neighbour, seems to make sense to me.
So perhaps my first response is actually under legislation, councils are required to consult on at least two options, so they would be unable to make a decision now about continuing on their own. They would need to go through the process, just like everyone else, to prepare a water services delivery plan and consult on at least two options. Yes, we do talk to Rotorua. In fact, we have conversations across the Bay of Plenty and the Waikato, and we continue to be part of actually 4 mayoral forums here in Taupō, which is one of our challenges.
Maybe you got that wrong, but I suppose their options could still be keep it in council or do their own CCO rather than join a large. Yeah, so I mean they're still within that. Yeah, okay.
Just one more thing I would say is that the Waikato water has got momentum, and so we're being, like we've said all along, we're not in the driving seat of Waikato water. We're just sort of sitting, seeing what's happening and seeing how it evolves. But definitely those other conversations are also happening. So it's not a clear, this is our only option as a multi-CCO. It's just the most developed one at the moment, present time. Just one other thing I just wanted to say about the timeline is sort of that even though the government said we had 12 months, we really only have 9 months, just because that 3 months prior to the election is sort of a dead zone. So we're kind of, we're even more compressed just because of that fact. So we just, as that paper is coming to you in December, we just kind of want to go through the heads of agreement in some detail just to kind of understand it. And as we've sort of been fairly consistent in we're keeping that option open, and that is our primary purpose, to be continuing part of, because we don't know yet if it's the best option for us or not, and therefore to get to the point where we can decide, we think it's the best option to stay in the tent. And part of that being we have to consult on those two options at least. So those are the options that government gave us, and obviously the Waikato water fits under the multi-council CCO option 3.
Just through the chair, just with being on the steering group, I think a conversation we had last week, my personal opinion that I raised last week was that I think it would be disingenuous and not show true intent if we didn't go out and consult on the multi-council CCO option. I'm not sure how I feel about it personally, but I think given that we've been given quite strong direction from Wellington, that we have to go out and ask the community if they want to regionalise or perhaps deal with water more locally. I don't think it's up to us to wipe that option out when it is the intent, but if we can put forward a good case and we get submissions back and we get iwi's perspective, which is very important to us to look at how water services are delivered, then we can move forward knowing that in good faith and through due diligence we've done what we were asked to do.
Thanks, Ruth.
Yes, no.
Oh, through the chair, sorry, just following on now, obviously, I don't know what detail, how, it's keeping us high level, but obviously this is a non-binding heads of agreement anyway. And we're going to go down with the stage 1, stage 2 scenario explanation, or is that?
We definitely can cover that. I've got it in the on-ramp, off-ramp, and the stage 1, stage 2 gets a bit confusing, but we can definitely talk about it. This.
Well, through the chair, just to clarify, you highlighted those 2 options in red.
Or does that mean we're only looking at those 2 from here on? Or no. Oh, so those are the favoured ones. Is that kind of why they are in red?
Sorry, that was just information that came from the Waikato pack. They provided some information to us. So it was from their perspective comparing the 2 options, but we also are definitely considering the 3rd option, which is a single Taupo CCO.
Oh, so these are their slides?
Not all of them. I just stole a couple, and that one was one of them.
And through the chair, we have had Vaughan Payne, who is an integral part of the Waikato Waters Done Well conversation. So we have had the steering group have several sessions with him recently, just to kind of provide a bit more information and what the thought process around the heads of agreement.
Yeah, and he can, if we can get to the end of this session, but there is availability from Vaughan if councillors wanted to have a session to go into some more detail around that. That is something we can organise. This slide is just the one that comes basically direct from the DIA. So it's just kind of visualising what the potential multi-CCO option looks like. And this is laid out in the heads of agreement. But it is just showing how the councils would agree to come together and they would appoint a representative to the shareholding forum. And so the shareholders forum would have representatives of each council that would then appoint the board and issue statements of expectations to the board. And then the board would be responsible for carrying out the activities and operations of the water entity. So the heads of agreement, the main thing that it talked through as, excuse me, Councillor Williamson has asked just about what will the Waikato water entity look like, who's going to be on the shareholder forum, how will the shareholders make decisions, some information about what qualifications the directors will need to have, you know, those kinds of things, what will be involved in the statement of expectations, how we're going to consult and transition, and the on-ramps and on-ramps, which I have in the next slide, so we can talk about that in a bit more detail. The stage 1, stage 2 bit is just kind of, that's the bit that is up to councils to decide. And we have some, maybe it's better if I go to the.
So the way I kind of done an analogy around stage 1 and stage 2, stage 1 is kind of funding, I feel like a service level agreement with that entity. And then stage 2 is a kind of more like a typical water care arrangement where assets are transferred and then all services are run by the entity.
Yeah, and what that looks like that's been worked out through the heads of agreement is that councils that, I'll just go to this slide, this is kind of the timeline for Waikato, but the expectation is it'll be stood up by mid-2026. And at that point, councils that are in for stage 1 would just be having some services provided to them. We still would work through how much or how little that would be, but we would still have some decision-making votes in that shareholder council as a stage 1 entity. The councils that go to stage 2, which is transferring full assets and everything is done by the entity, get slightly higher voting rights. Am I speaking correctly, Julie? Correct me. Yeah. And agreeing to be a stage 1 means those councils would remain party to the entity, but not having transferred all of the, or everything all at once. There is an expectation that was agreed in the heads of agreement that those councils that are start in stage 1 would agree to transition to stage 2 within 5 years. So that's 2031 something. So just the purpose of this slide is just to remind everyone that signing up to the heads of agreement is where we are now, and that has an off-ramp that we're deciding in December, which is we might not sign that. So that's an off-ramp. The next thing that's going to happen for the councils that do sign the heads of agreement is they will work through more specifics on how the entity will be stood up, creating all those documents, what the board would look like. And yeah, formalising the governance documentation that would be presented back to councils, and also begin planning for the transition, because obviously there's lots of complexity and work in that space. So once those documents come back to council, probably definitely after the public consultation, so I don't know, April, May, maybe. Even if we've signed the heads of agreement, we could opt out at that point. So that's the second off ramp that exists.
Also, could you just, so you mentioned 5-year transition. So what was that? Transition to?
Transferring all of our assets is stage 2. Sorry, it's a bit confusing because we're talking about phases of establishing the entity, but then the entity also has 2 different potential stages. So I think, yeah, it is.
I think the best way of describing it is,
once you enter at stage 1, you can't just sit there forever. You've got to progress, and there's a 5-year timeline. Having entered at stage 1, you then need to progress to stage 2 within 5 years. You can't just sit there, I don't know, like on your learner's license forever. You've got to keep moving through the system.
Through the chair. So what you're saying is it's going to be a progression of the water assets that belong to the people of the Taupō District are going to be removed from the people of the Taupō District into another entity eventually. And lose their ownership of it.
So through the chair, that's what stage 2 is. So at stage 2, like I mentioned, that's the water care model. And just to reiterate, this is an option as part of the water service delivery plan around how we're going to deliver services in the future. And just to also reiterate for the chair, many other councils are also having workshops this week and over the next couple of weeks. So it'd be interesting to see how some of those around decisions on signing the heads of agreement.
Councillor Shepherd.
So, as you know, I accidentally gate crashed the steering group that I'm not on, but I found it really helpful. And I'm just wondering, is that going from stage 1 to stage 2, is that the part that allows for, what do they call it, price harmonisation? Is that the timeline that you have for other councils to catch up who haven't invested as well, or is that separate again?
Separate again.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for the chair, there's still lots that are getting worked through, and obviously the purpose here this morning is to give you an overview of the heads of agreement and what we're wanting you to make a decision on December. And you've heard me here talk many times around, hey, we want to stay on the bus. We just want to be a passenger and just see where that ends up. And actually, it's still part of our options assessment as part of the water service delivery plan.
Well, Councillor Campbell, a minute. Can I just really encourage everybody to read the slide pack that's in Diligent. What you're getting today, and so no disrespect, Tony and Joe, this is a Reader's Digest version, because you can't get in the space of an hour what we've been through over several weeks and what the team have been doing, living and breathing for a long, long time. There is an incredible amount of information and an awful lot of detail, and it will be worth going through the slide pack a number of times to get your heads around that. And it will be really good to keep us at it, allow the team to go through the presentation today, because I know there'll be lots and lots of questions. But that's my encouragement. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this is the water care model, Water Care Auckland, which happened, many years ago, a decade ago or so.
more than that, isn't it? Or, yeah, well, I mean, given that, would it be a good idea to, I'm sure there's a lot of learnings up there from that experience, positives and negatives from the likes of Rodney District and all the other various councils who would be raving about it or spitting on it. I'm not sure, but is there some way of getting that feedback?
So perhaps just I'll answer that one because there was a Waikato Mayoral Forum yesterday which Kevin and I attended, and we had a presentation from Watercare there. So yes, we also, there's been presentations from Taswater, all sorts. I appreciate councillors, there's an awful lot of information and it's a fast moving process to work through. So yeah, there has been people reach out to Watercare.
Councillor Rankin?
I know, I'm just really cynical, having been a receiver of Watercare. I wouldn't trust anything they told you that was good, having experienced it and been on the other, and I have not read the slide pack, so excuse me for that, but by golly, I take everything they say with the biggest grain of salt that there is, because their service when I was part of council was appalling, and God help you if you were waiting for some water service in some suburb somewhere. So unless there's been a dramatic change, I am really cynical about anything Watercare telling you that they've done well.
So the significant change is they've retreated to the north of the Bombay Hills. So short of a rabbit-proof fence going up there, that's where they'll remain. Just hang on. That is not what we're doing. But again, I'll reiterate, it's really important to read the slide back to get your head around this.
Look, I'm not even saying it's what you're doing. I'm just trying to share my experience, which has been appalling. So that was what I was.
So, Councillor Campbell?
No, I'm just saying, asking Watercare management for their perspective on how they're going is probably not the most unbiased people to ask. It's more the people from the ones that are probably stuck in it, or elsewhere, who used to be in the old councils, actually.
Not sure that advances us today, but I'll come back to Tony and Joe. If you, back to you, please.
So for the chair, that's obviously the HOA on-ramps and off-ramps that we're talking about, and here obviously is around where we're at.
Yeah, I think just all of these are really good input, and that is the things we're wrestling with, like how are we going to make this decision, but just reminding that the timeline right now is, are we keeping this option on the table as part of our consultation or not? That's the point that we're at in the timeline. Working through all those thorny issues is the work that remains to be done.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to the options assessment that we've been working on. Again, just to reiterate that Waikato Water Done Well is one of those options.
Yes, I'm putting this up with slight hesitation. Please don't take this as absolute gospel, but this is kind of the framework that we are working through, laying out all of the possible things that we need to think about, including points that have been raised here about who's the winners, who's the losers, the various scenarios, and then trying to be able to weigh those up against each other. And I think it's just really important to just keep remembering there's advantages and disadvantages in all the options. There is no shining silver bullet. So yeah, we're just trying to be somewhat impartial and gathering all the information and the evidence. Like we said, we'll be working through an external review, and when we get that analysis, and then intention is to bring something like this a bit more refined, because this is just a very brief cut I did this morning, but back to you to get the indications of where we sort of think we're landing for that preferred option.
So what's BAU?
Business as usual.
Yeah. We've put future-proofed in there just because recognising that under local water done well, we do need to make some improvements, I shouldn't say improvements, but some changes to be able to meet with the legislation, including proving that our water services are financially sustainable and ring-fenced on their own, those kinds of things. So, yeah.
So we've got an economic regulator, so it would be regulated by the Commerce Commission, so that will be a completely different environment for us to work in as a sector. And we also have an environmental regulator from Taumata too. So we've always maintained as a council that status quo is not an option. We need to do something.
Can I ask a question, please, Chair? With our TEL fund, we self-insure our assets. How does that fit in to a model which goes with another council?
Just saying we're doing some work on that at the moment. It's probably the safest answer at this point. Financial modelling.
So at the risk of digressing, if we went back to the previous Three Waters model, it wouldn't be our assets, it wouldn't be our responsibility, and if something went wrong, not our problem.
So then we have that TL fund available to do other insurance, which we heard from Sarah this morning is currently a major issue with us.
That's a hypothetical, not on the table at the moment. But
well, it's not hypothetical because if it's not, because if the TL fund is covering those assets and they don't belong to us any longer, then we've got that fund available for something else. It's not a question actually. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Yeah.
Yep, through the chair. So we're just going to do a very, again, high level, just run through the options.
Yeah, so I mean, basically just to sum up, at the moment we're seriously looking at three main options. There are other options on the periphery, but the main options for us are remaining in council. And if we feel confident that we're well equipped to handle the existing challenges, we can show that we're financially sufficient and get some of those benefits that we know we will prioritise, which is being able to have our local voice in all of those things. And we do see that, you know, changing would be a big upheaval, would be a big thing. So if we want to reduce that could be some of the reasons that we would choose to remain in council. The single CCO may become a appealing option, I'm not sure, but if we want some of the benefits of a CCO model, which being able to borrow more debt, some of those things, but we want to remain owning the assets ourselves, get some possible governance changes with having a dedicated board looking after just the water entity, so we had that separation. Those are some of the options to think about with a single CCO.
So if I just jump in there, so
bearing in mind both of those, single CCO for Taupo specifically, or going it alone, comes with the caveat that central government through DIA will be watching exactly what we do. So it's not necessarily we're in a better position to do everything ourselves, and we could actually financially, logistically, physically do that. As I've mentioned to you before, based on the conversations in Wellington last week, there is a significant push from this government for collaboration across councils. So we may find, irrespective of how well we can do it relative to our neighbours, there will be political pressure. So that's, you know, outside of your mandate in terms of the options here. So, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Through the chair, notwithstanding that we do have to show financial sustainability by, I think, June 2028, don't we? So that would be one of the benefits of being in stage one, to see how the whole CCO or the Waikato model goes anyway. There's a bit of breathing space.
Yeah. Yes, that's absolutely right. And then the multi-CCO Waikato Water is if we really see some big existing challenges, big challenges coming that we don't feel we can manage ourselves. I'm not saying that we do, but that is one of the things to think about. Obviously, we've talked about the possible benefits of scale, outweighing the costs and uncertainties. If we're okay with some of the principles of a multi-CCO, which is obviously the asset owning and the price harmonisation, or whatever you want to call it, and prioritising local growth over other people's priorities. So all of that is obviously still some of the things that need to be worked through. But to Kevin's point, if we think that it's highly, if we feel we're going to get pushed into some future amalgamation anyway, that's also one of the reasons to continue exploring this, so that, you know, that we're at least understood what it all looks like.
So I don't want to jump ahead of what you might be saying, but this one you need to read the small print on that,
because if you look at how a multi-council CCO will operate, compliance is number one. Development for growth is at the bottom. So if we're a small fish in a big pond, as opposed to the only fish in our own pond, the consequences could be, irrespective of what development needs we have around housing. And we just talked about what was an agenda item this afternoon around the north side of the bridge. If that falls below what our partners within a multi-council CCO have around compliance issues, then it could end up being a hurry up and wait situation. So I don't want to be a damp squid on that, but there are some fish hooks in all of the different models. Sorry, Tony, I didn't mean to.
Through the sea, just on that one, obviously compare that to the Three Waters model as well.
Yes.
It's a similar fish hook.
Yeah. Sandra?
Yes, sir. It's got enough of it, sorry, hasn't it? Through the chair, in this model, I would think that we would need to be aware of the other councils' needs and situations before we signed up to this, not just our own. Yeah.
Through the chair, and with this option 3, we don't know at this moment in time. We've got no idea of how many councils are in the pond at all. They're going through their own processes, but we do know that my understanding is that Hamilton City Council aren't part of these conversations. So they're a big player. That's a significant fish in the pond. So we don't know how it's going to look yet.
So that list with the signatory page isn't giving us a sort of heads up or anything. That's just everyone they've reached out to. Coromandel and
It's all the CEs that have been part of the process of negotiating the heads of agreement. So it doesn't reference, it's not intentional or intended to reflect those that will sign. It's just who's been in the room while we've been negotiating.
Yes, following on from Councillor Greenslade, I mean, being in the industry, I would assume you have some anecdotal knowledge or estimate of the state of some of these other districts' infrastructure. I mean, are they falling apart? I mean, I've heard of there's councils up north which they're falling apart, and you wouldn't want to be going into partnership with them. But I mean, do we have such? Do you have such anecdotal knowledge in the industry of these other councils thinking of signing up?
Chair, I've got lots of knowledge, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to help.
Anecdotes are fine. I think it's fair to say that every council will come to the table in a different state from every other council. No two entities will be identical. Some will be much better prepared and will have invested wisely over a number of years, as we have, and some will not have and will not be in as strong a position as Taupō District Council is. But that's a given, and I'm not sure that it would be wise to take anecdotes over clear data. So I'll go to Councillor Park and then back to you, Tony.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. To have an off-ramp off stage 1, I think is really vital, because I think I sort of feel like staying in the sandpit, if you like, or the pond is probably better, but we don't know what we don't know because we can't make decisions for other councils, and there are some that aren't as lucky as we are with our amazing infrastructure, particularly in the waters area. There are some who might not have as much debt, but they've got a lot of work to do, whereas we might have more debt, but we're further ahead than others. So I really think it's important to keep an open mind about waiting to see who's going to sign up and how many will sign up, because the smaller the amount of councils in a multi-CCO, the more expensive it's going to become for each participating council. So, yeah, I just think that we need to just have good intent, show that we are going to go with open minds into the process, let the community have a say, because they didn't get to before with Three Waters, and then decide. So yes, it's all high level, but I think trying to compare apples and pears with bananas and everything else is just a ridiculous way to look at it.
So, Councillor, conscious that we are recording this, and I'm also conscious that those who are watching this will be interested in the presentation. I'm also happy for you to keep going so we get it all recorded and all presented rather than cutting it off at 11:30. So
Just one last.
just really quickly.
Yeah.
Just on that question of comparing apples and bananas and anecdotes and stuff, I mean, yes, it's all very hearsay at the moment, but at what stage in the process will we, or question, will we be able to compare ourselves and state with the other councils to say, hey, actually, maybe this isn't such a good idea going in with this law?
Yeah, through the chair, that's an excellent question. Thank you. And I was going to respond to Anna's point around the same kind of thing. That information is being worked on, the financial comparisons, because obviously finance is an important aspect, as are other areas that we had listed earlier. So that's happening at this moment in time. So what we're doing, what I was going to come to is the timeline, as we've already covered off, is we're going to be coming back to you in the new year, where a lot of all of this information will have been all researched and double checked by that stage. So that's what we'll come back to you in February and present all that information around the full-blown options analysis, what that looks like, how we are comparing apples with apples as best we can, and realising obviously that there'd be pros and cons to all those options that we'll be bringing to you. And it's really important that we do that in February, because then we need to prepare our consultation document as well.
Yeah, it's actually a really critical point. You want to know exactly what you're signing up for.
And the issue of price optimization, or whatever the euphemism has been used, harmonisation. So let's be clear, we're already doing that across this district. So everybody pays the same in the Taupō district for water. The cost to deliver that water to everybody's house is not the same. It's vastly different, but we all pay the same. So at a larger scale, ultimately, that's what it will look like within a regional model. Have I got that reasonably close to that? Yeah. So I'll come, Rachel, and then we'll come back to the team.
Yeah, and I guess further to that point, or perhaps we're making the same point, because when we go out and consult, what people are going to want to know is that we've considered the fact that we're in a reasonably good state, and some of the other councils we might be going into a partnership deal with may not be in a particularly good state, and our ratepayers will be subsidising those ratepayers. So we just need to understand where those off-ramps are in relation to that information becoming apparent, because we don't know what we don't know yet. But I'm glad to see that there are off-ramps, and presumably they are talking about a staged approach, so that a council with a better infrastructure, less debt, for example, isn't then subsidising other areas.
I think you've hit it on the head, because it's exactly who is going to pay for whose infrastructure, and that would be one of the critical things. But anyway, Tony, back to you.
If I can just say two things in answer to that. I know Julie had lots of fun talking with the chief executives on that point. And there is stuff in the heads of agreement to address underinvestment, to sort of bring everyone up to a level playing field. But how that's actually going to happen, you know, is still the difficult work to be worked out. But it's not, every council was thinking about this. Like, of course, no one wants to be paying for other people's stuff. So it's definitely front of mind for everyone. And making it so that we aren't in that situation is paramount. And the other thing I would say is, yeah, we know it does come down to the bottom line. So that is going to be one of the most important pieces of information we get in the next sort of 6 weeks, is how much is my rates bill on the existing, and how much is my rates bill going to be under this model? Like, what's the difference? What does it look like? And doing a bit of, you know, there's obviously, what does that mean? What do I get? That kind of stuff. So that's where we are trying to get to in the next little while.
So what we're saying, equalisation is negotiable depending on how many water connections and things like that through the district, compared, as you say, with people who've underinvested, and we're doing a really good job. So there's that negotiation as well can go on.
Maybe I'm wrong, Julie, but you can correct me. But
I think, let's be honest, ultimately a regional CCO is over time is going to be about you know, all being in it together. And all probably paying the same over time. So let's just be honest, that's part of what this process is. There's a period of time where there'd be a transition process, or the ability to to bring assets into a similar line, and the ability to perhaps jam jar costs. But let's be honest, that's part of a regional model, and so that is something for us to consider and to work through.
I think that's actually, through the chair, perfect timing. So just to reiterate and loop it back in, you know, we've got the paper coming on the 10th around the heads of agreement, and our advice will be that we sign that and we continue on in that process. Again, that's being in the sandpit, being in the pond, being a bus, and then just making sure that we're just making you aware of some of those options we're looking at, that we're going to be putting into the water service delivery plan, and we'll be looking at consulting out in the new year.
Yes, thank you. Just through the chair, Tony, we also have some funding for what it would be to enter stage 1, wouldn't it? So it's at no cost to the ratepayer to continue on the highway towards the CCO, but still being aware that there are off-ramps off that highway. But the money that it would cost to sign up to stage 1 is not ratepayer funded.
Thanks, Councillor Park. I checked those financials this morning, just coming into this, because I knew that would be an important question. And sorry, I meant to cover it earlier, but just forgot. So as we've talked about, the costs, depending on how many councils sign up, depends how much the costs are going to get spread. So there's one number, and then it's going to get divided up depending on who just stays in for the next stage. So the cost could be between 80,000 to, if 9 councils remain in for the heads of agreement, but will increase if only 5 councils agree to stay into the next stage. Then the cost will go up to, 160,000 or something like that. The remaining funds we have from the transition funding is about, as of September, it was 150,000, but there's some additional costs we know we're incurring, just some internal stuff and the external review that we're planning. So we can definitely fund the next stage from non-ratepayer money. If 9 councils stay in, if it ends up being less, we might have to use some of the money that we put aside in the LTP for this work.
Thank you. Yeah. Let's go one of the latter councils to make this decision too. Process.
Campbell. Yeah, did you mention, I just caught it, if some councils have already decided not to go, did I hear you say? They weren't going to do the multi.
Yeah, well, through the chair, my understanding is that I think Hamilton have removed themselves from these conversations.
I had the impression they were kind of the driver initially, but was that wrong? Was that why?
I haven't been privy to any of those meetings, but that's certainly what I've heard.
Those are the dates that other councils have decided. Just if that is useful.
So through the chair, that concludes our presentation.
Are there any final questions?
Yeah.
Sandra.
Thank you. How does this affect Waikato Regional Council?
So I'll try my best. I'm not trying to present as I know on the position of Waikato Regional Council, but from what I understand, and I support them, their role is really having an interest as a regulator in our water and wastewater services, and so they're particularly interested in conversations that may improve the outcome for those services. They're also doing it from a regional support perspective, and it's actually, from my perspective, been really great to have the Chief Executive of the Waikato Regional Council in our conversations. In terms of their decision making on the next stage, obviously they don't own assets, so it puts them in it'd be difficult for them to continue, but it's certainly been great having them in the room. That's just my perspective.
Because from their point of view, they would then only have to deal with one entity, wouldn't they, instead of a whole lot of different councils. So I'd imagine from their point of view, it would be a much smoother process.
Any other questions? Thanks, team. Let me just reiterate, it's really important that we get our heads around all the information in the slide pack. And if you've got any questions, sorry, Tony and Joe, I'm going to throw you under the bus here. If we've got any questions, ask, because we are going to need to explain this to our community. Not wanting to be too alarmist, but this is the big ticket item for the next few months in terms of decision making for us. Three Waters got kicked for touch. Not really. It's just come back rebranded as this, with a few things that have been added on and a few things have been taken off. And one of the things that have been added on is the fact that we're now going to pay for it. Whereas before, the money was coming from who knows where, but not out of our pockets. Well, it's now fairly and squarely on us. So no more magicking up money from Treasury. This has to come out of our ratepayers' funds. So it's important we get this right, and it's important we understand it before we make a decision on it. Thanks, team. We'll call the workshop closed.